Unmute. Right. Hi. Can you hear me?
I can hear
Yes.
you.
We'll hear
Okay, good.
you.
Okay, perfect. Sorry, I'm a little bit late. I kind of forgot about the time and was playing a game of chess with my son and it ran away with me. Okay, where do we start?
I think we're about ready. I don't know, Chris, do you want to just press the go button and then I can go?
Yes, go for it. Thank you. Welcome, Anthony and Vernon.
Thank you.
Right. Good evening and welcome to another in the series Talking Hi-Fi presented by the Cape Town Hi-Fi Club. It's a particularly chilly evening with snow on the mountains, which explains why I'm somewhat wrapped up, although the heating's on. Now, some might understandably question the appropriateness of talking hi-fi against a backdrop of scenes of unrest playing out in two of the country's economic nerve centers. Of course, we are not blind to life's harsh realities. Here's the thing though, we can be responsible, caring citizens as well as, dare I say it, audiophiles. After all, music hath charms to soothe the savage breast. Speaking of music, our guest this evening is Vernon Galp of Cape Town-based Audiosmiths. Now, he doesn't play music himself, although he may well do, we'll find out.
No, I don't.
But over the past 24 years, according to Audiosmiths, it's a company that's built a loyal client base of direct clients, architects, interior designers, and builders on both residential and commercial projects. Their services range from simple TV mounts and sound bars to hi-fi upgrades, multi-room sound, streaming, home theater, and automation, and I guess a whole lot more besides. Vernon, why don't you kick off by giving us a bit of background about Vernon Galp and Audiosmiths and where it all started. Over to you.
All right, no problem. Thank you. So where it all started, I think I would probably say it started with a love of music and a love of hi-fi. So as a teen, staying at home, I used to trade secondhand equipment to kind of build up my hi-fi system. So I would buy an amp and buy a pair of speakers and then sell them at a little bit of a profit and move on to something better. But I think a lot of that was just for my personal use. I did find that I could actually make a little bit of money out of it too. And it kind of grew into a bit of a hobby, but also a little bit of a business. And when I was studying marketing and sales management at Tech, I did spend quite a bit of my time buying and selling through the classifieds. And by doing that, actually making enough money to kind of have some pocket money and have some extra money. I would then say that kind of love of hi-fi led me into the hi-fi trade. And I worked for the Hi-Core Group, which owned Audiovision and Mellotronics at the time. And that was probably 30 years ago. I was with them for 5, 6, 7 years and then went on my own, I think in 1997. So that is 24 years ago, as you say. And yeah, the business is always run from home. It's a smallish business. I still run from home. I've got an office at the back of our house with a secure storeroom. But it's not a big business. It's a business with 3 vans. We've got 4 installers. I've got a secretary, and I've got a brother who helps me with some programming, and that's really it. So it's not a huge business. Yeah, I think does that cover a little bit of where I came from and what it's all about?
We're going to get into more detail about what you do in terms of installations, which seems to be the big part of your business.
Sure.
But could you tell us a little bit then about the brands you're involved with and who are the big ones that you've been with for a while?
So I suppose my biggest brand going back to kind of 20, 30 years ago would have been NAD. NAD and at that time AR speakers were huge. And being in retail, I used to do a lot of NAD equipment. I actually won one of their sales competitions years ago when I was in my 20s, and they took me over to Scotland for a trip to one of their conferences, which was amazing fun. So I've always done NAD, but I actually do very little of it these days. They're still a good brand, and they're fairly strong in the stereo market, but they're not particularly good in the surround sound home theater market, and that is quite a big part of the market. So because of that, I've kind of moved. I would say that my biggest amplifier receiver type brand at the moment is Marantz. Marantz and Denon are very strong. I do a little bit of Cambridge Audio, a little bit of Yamaha, but Marantz and Denon would be my main ones. Then also in the amplifier range, a little bit more upmarket, some of the Rotel stuff. They've got some new Mitchie range of amplifiers, which is more on the stereo side. And the Rotel stuff, the Mitchie amps are fantastic. They really are amazing. And I've actually recently started doing some of the Premier stuff. I don't know if you know Premier at all. It's an amazing brand. Their stuff's pretty expensive, but it really sounds good, and it's beautifully built. And then speakers, I'm a huge Bowers & Wilkins fan, so B&W is a big part of what I do. I'm lucky enough to sell some of their top-end 800 series every now and then, but they're becoming really expensive these days. I mean, I think the bookshelf 800 series go for 150, 160,000 Rand a pair these days. Whereas the floor standers start at 200 and go right up to 600,000. So they really are expensive. But the everyday Bowers & Wilkins are reasonably priced, and they're very good. I do a little bit of KEF. I do a little bit of Monitor Audio. Those are probably my three main speaker brands. Slightly less expensive stuff, a little bit of JMO. What else do I do? Klipsch isn't one of my favorites. It's an American brand, but it has a place in some people's homes. If they want loud and big sound, it's impressive.
Now that brings me to a question arising from what you were just saying. Now, do you find that people are coming to you with some of their own ideas, or is it a question, or rather a case of, should I say, of you advising them what you think would be best for them? How does it work?
It's actually a great question. It is amazing how seldom people come with their own ideas. They have absolutely no idea what they want. And the other crazy thing is that very few of them even seem to enjoy listening to music. It sounds ridiculous, but half the top-end systems, and I don't do hugely top-end stuff, but so often when we sell really good hi-fi, it's simply because we've offered it to a guy with lots of money and he buys it because he can. It's quite sad, actually. But I honestly believe that half our guys just don't even listen to music very often.
I have to say, now I do have a little bit of experience in this, having been around on Earth for a while. I think this is not uncommon in any high rolling environment.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You know, how many of the guys that buy a Ferrari are buying it because they want to take it to the track and enjoy it, or how many of them are buying it because it's a cool looking car and they can show their friends they've got some money? I do think it happens a lot. I'm amazed at how few of our clients actually sit down and listen to music.
Well, that is a disappointing commentary on that little comment I made right at the outset about music having charms to soothe a savage breast. Well,
yeah,
really, that's not an issue.
You know, yeah. But having said that, I do love getting a client who's never listened to music properly and sitting him down in a seat and kind of completely amazing the person because they can't believe how good it sounds. So they are impressed by it, which is great. I love that.
Do you then have almost a life-changing effect on people in that way?
For sure, absolutely. You know, and funnily enough, the other strange thing with the guys who spend quite a bit of money is how seldom they actually want to listen to it before they buy it. So I will make some suggestions and they'll kind of say, well, we trust you. What do you think we should get? You know, I will then make a suggestion, but 99% of the time, I'm not demoing the equipment. I'm just suggesting it on an email, showing them a link, a picture, what it looks like, giving them a quote, and they say, yes, great, bring it. And I set it up in their house and it's done. So they don't even compare things or listen to them themselves, which is
I'm
also...
sure if you'd gone to a financier with a business model that depended on that kind of interaction, they'd have laughed you out of the room or brought the guys in white coats to put you in a padded cell. But anyway, moving right along to something more serious, just an interjection from my side. Yes, we're a small crowd this evening, but I think I better just remind you all that if you'd like, during the course of this chat, which is probably not going to last too long this evening, and you've got a question or a comment to make, just stick it on the chat alongside, use the chat facility. I think if Vernon's available, maybe he could field some direct questions from you guys later on after we've done the formal part. But at any rate, let's get back to, as I said, the formal part. There was a question that I'd thought about, and I put it to you earlier before we actually had this evening.
Yeah.
About significant changes, really significant changes that have occurred in home audio and media during your 2+ decades in the business.
So, interesting question. On the audio side, of course, the source has been the biggest change. So the change from tape to CD, from record turntables to CD players, and now, of course, from CD players to streamed audio. So that would be the most significant 2 or 3 steps that have happened. But in the amplifier and speaker side, I actually don't think there's been a huge advancement in terms of technology. You know, a great pair of speakers 20 years ago is by all means still a great pair of speakers. I think that the amplifiers have maybe come along a little bit more than the speakers have, but I'm actually quite surprised that amps and speakers are still made the way they are and nothing's really changed that much. But having said that, streamed audio has changed the audio market enormously because everybody that has a phone or an iPad has access to music, and it's actually made it so easy for people to have a huge library to listen to. And the quality is generally not bad.
Well, you know, there was something else that connected to that I was interested in, about people who, and I suppose this does apply to some of your customers you were talking about, that probably don't want to see these boxes as they tend to be still, cluttering up their living spaces. And do your customers prefer to have their components hidden, or do they want to put them on display? And tell us a bit about how the aesthetics of speakers and so forth has changed over time.
So there has been a big change there. And what's quite interesting is that the old style floor standing speaker, which to me is the nicest sounding speaker, is a little bit under threat because people don't like the look of them. And they have made them sleeker, and they do them in white and in different colors and high gloss, and they've made them look fancier. But we do more and more ceiling speakers and bookshelf speakers, which is a pity because you can't really get quite the same out of them. There are good quality ones for sure, but especially ceiling speakers, it's really tricky to get a good quality sound out of a set of ceiling speakers.
And of course, from a practicality point of view, a stand mount or bookshelf, I suppose one would call it a stand mount, really, takes up pretty much the same space area as a floor stander.
It does. It does. The difference is that people quite often have a little unit that the TV sits above.
Of course.
And those bookshelf speakers can kind of go on either side of the bookshelf of the unit. But I agree, they do take the same floor space essentially, which is a little bit of a pity. So we do quite a lot of multi-room where people are doing sound on the patio, sound in the dining room, sound in the lounge, sound in the kitchen. And the nice thing about that these days is it's very simple to run off an app. And what we often do is our kind of preferred solution would be to use something like a little Sonos port, which I'm sure most of you know the Sonos equipment's really, really popular, and they make little portable speakers. But Sonos have a little kind of a Sonos preamp, which allows you to control all your streamed music over an app. So you can use Spotify or Apple Music or whatever you want to over an app. And you can then stream it to this little Sonos port, and that plugs into any amp or any pair of speakers. So you can then really get a high quality hi-fi sound, but you can still use the Sonos app to join zones and have music playing in different rooms. So we do use that quite a bit. But very often that's done with ceiling speakers. So we'll put in a big 6 or 8 or 10 channel power amp, and we'll run speakers all over the house off an app. So that's quite popular.
Which brings me to a question about your whole home, entire home systems and installations. And some of them seem to be quite complex, as I'd imagine. The higher up the spending scale you go, the less people want to see things, but the more bells and whistles they want on their setups. Do you do both domestic and corporate customers, and what are the challenges and the solutions that you've come across?
So we certainly do a lot more residential work than corporate. We've done some corporate through the years, but generally it's a boardroom. We have been doing quite a few of these little Zoom meeting microphone speaker units all in one, which are quite popular. So those have moved us a little bit more into corporate, where you have a big screen on the wall and you have a sound bar type solution. So a little bar that has an amplifier and speakers built in, and it also has a little microphone and a camera. And you can then use that for Zoom meetings to get better quality. So that's moved us into the corporate market a little bit more, but we've never been particularly focused on corporate. And I think there are quite big companies out there that make that their sole kind of market. And they probably, for that reason, would do it better than we would. So we certainly concentrate on residential. I prefer residential because I'm a hi-fi guy and I love doing music. And corporate just doesn't have the same feel. There's nobody there that kind of loves the equipment and wants to play with it. Corporate's very cold. It's just put in the system, take your money and off you go. And that to me isn't really what I do and what it's all about.
You mentioned the M word, I'm afraid, and so I have to ask you, in terms of money, what are the kinds of really high-end systems that you've installed?
So the high-end stuff, I've done some of the big Class A amplifiers. Class A is part of the Bowers & Wilkins group. So one of the big systems I've done is big Class A streaming unit with a pre and a power and a pair of B&W 801s, which I think today sell for 650,000 Rand a pair. I mean, that was 2 or 3 years ago, and he spent close on 2 million Rand, and that was across a few rooms, but most of it was in one room. The client has a little whiskey bar. He's a client with money who loves music, so it's not just money. He spends it because he sits there listening often. So I love that. Other big systems that we've done some of the big KEF speakers. We've done a little bit of Macintosh. What else do we do? The Premiere stuff that we've done recently, I've actually only started doing Premiere a few months ago. Very impressed with it. Some of their stuff is quite top end, but wow, it sounds amazing. I mean, their CD player retails for about 40,000, which is expensive for a CD player because CD players will be worth nothing in a few years. You know, there's so little market for CD players as it is. What they've done, which is quite clever, is that along with the Burr Brown DACs and the parts that they've built into that CD player, they've built in a streaming device as well. So what you can do is you can use it as a CD player, but you can also use it as a streaming device. And by doing that, you're getting the quality of the digital to analog converter that's actually made for the CD player. You're getting that same quality for your streamed music. So that kind of makes a 40,000 Rand CD player a little bit more valuable because it has some extra functionality.
So you've given us a bit of a taste of the champagne lifestyle. Now let's move down to the other end of the spectrum, the alcohol-free beer lifestyle.
Okay.
In fact, these days, it's almost the sparkling water lifestyle given lockdown restrictions. Anyhow, what are some of the audio areas that a consumer rather can still expect decent improvements with a modest outlay? Or what are some of those areas that we often neglect?
So there's been a lot of growth in the sound bar market, which is quite sad in a way because it takes people away from hi-fi. So people often, because their TV has quite poor audio, they add a little sound bar below the TV, which gives you your amp and your speaker. And that in itself does make sense because the audio has become worse and worse because as the frame or the bezel of the TV has become slimmer and slimmer, the speakers have moved away from the front of the TV and they now get mounted at the back of the TV. So TV audio is particularly poor. So people, I can understand them buying a sound bar, but that sound bar then becomes their hi-fi. And unfortunately, that takes away from a lot of the lower end of the hi-fi market. So where somebody might have spent 8,000 or 10,000 Rand on an amplifier and 6,000 or 8,000 Rand on a little pair of bookshelf speakers and actually had a nice little hi-fi, they now spend 5,000 or 6,000 or 8,000 Rand and buy a sound bar and actually end up missing out on hi-fi. And a lot of those clients who start with a small amp and a small pair of bookshelf speakers grow into the bigger clients who become kind of hi-fi lovers through the years. So I do think that sound bars have done quite an injustice to the hi-fi market. And by taking away a lot of that lower end of the market, they're actually going to end up damaging the middle and the upper end market because people aren't going to be exposed to hi-fi. If that makes sense.
Although I guess if you had a sound bar and a half decent subwoofer, you could annoy the heck out of the neighbors and ask me how I know this.
Yeah. How do you know this?
We live next door to neighbors.
Okay. And they have a soundbar with a subwoofer.
Yeah. Well, those low frequencies are the ones that you feel right
Yeah.
there.
They can make a bit of noise, but it's not a real hi-fi, unfortunately.
Yeah, I think that this isn't something that can be debated. You have the whole question of, do people sit and listen to music, or do they want something in the background? Well, yeah, that's a whole philosophical debate that's probably for another time and place. So you were going to maybe talk about some audio areas that, with a little bit of a modest outlay. So you're suggesting that one of those areas is your soundbar could happily be upgraded significantly, or in fact not get a soundbar, but go straight to separates.
Sure. So, separates these days, the little amplifiers, a little stereo amp that is rated at 35, 40 watts per channel, really can sound very good. Um, Unfortunately, our RAN's not very strong, as you all know. So even a basic amplifier these days can cost probably 8 or 10,000 Rand is where the basic ones start. But there are some nice units there. The baby little Denon, the small Marantz, the small Yamaha, they're actually great amps for that sort of money. And if you put that with a little pair of monitor audio, for example, bookshelf speakers or Kef bookshelf speakers, or maybe the little baby Bowers and Wilkins, I do think you can get some really good sound. People would usually not pair that with a CD player these days. They'd either possibly use their TV to stream and the optical out into the amp is one possibility. The other possibility is to buy a little Bluetooth device and just Bluetooth off a phone. And the audio quality on those is not bad. It's not going to do on a top end system, but it's absolutely fine for that. So I do think that in the lower end of the market, there's still some good value and some decent quality products. That's for sure.
It is just a hint there in what you're talking about, that it's possible those would refer to younger people, maybe. I don't know if I'm correct there.
So, it's interesting. My client base has kind of grown with me, and I do have probably a fairly elderly client base. So I deal with youngsters a little bit, but they're very often the children of my clients, funnily enough. So, it kind of brings me to one of the questions I know you were going to ask about, where do my clients come from? And 90% of my clients come from word of mouth. And that's, unfortunately, if my client base grows up with me in terms of age, their contemporaries are going to then phone me, and they're all of the same age. So I certainly have a much smaller young client base than older client base, that's for sure.
Of course, these days it's not necessarily true that the older clients will be the ones with the big bucks.
It's not. Sorry, go for it.
No, I'd finished.
Yeah, okay. I do agree. But I agree. There are young clients who have bigger money, for sure. But on average, the older clients generally have a little bit more to spend, for sure.
I'd like to jump onto something completely different now, although it is part of your business. Tell me about the home automation, the smart homes, Internet of Things, all that sort of thing. Tell me a bit about that.
So what's quite interesting with home automation is that we actually do a little bit less of it now than we did 3 or 4 years ago. And I think the reason for that is that Internet of Things is part of it. So many of the products that you buy these days can actually be controlled so easily without an interface. They've got their own interface. So 5 or 10 years ago, if you bought a whole lot of products, controlling them was really difficult. And having an automation system made a lot of sense. So you could press one button and it could do 4 or 5 different things and make it all happen. These days, if you buy a Marantz amplifier that can run 3 different zones, 3 different areas, that Marantz amp comes with an app that is super simple to use. So unless you're wanting to add your security system and your aircon and your cameras and other things to your music system, you don't have to go the automation route these days. And if you do go the automation route, it has become quite expensive. So the controlling products in the market, Control 4 is probably the biggest automation product in South Africa, and actually probably one of the biggest in the world at the moment. Control 4 is not cheap. Even buying a single processor and some of the little control attachments that allow you to operate things is really expensive. RTI, all the systems that can run lighting, security, audiovisual, you're usually looking at in the hundreds of thousands. They really aren't cheap systems, and there's no really easy way to do them cheaply these days.
Oh, well, I suppose that is the price of progress. So you'd think that on the one end, it would be cheaper because of miniaturization and increased computerization, but clearly not. Is there a demand for that sort of thing still, or in terms of integrated systems, or is it pretty much faded away then?
So there is a demand, and it's probably something that Audiosmiths as a company don't do maybe as well as we could, because the problem I have with it is because we're a small company, I'm the guy who has to go out and do all the quoting and work out the system engineering and how it's all going to work. And with home automation, that takes a huge amount of time. And the hit rate on home automation clients is quite low.
Okay.
So what happens is if I've got a hi-fi client and I quote 10 clients, I will get 8 or 9 of those jobs. It's as simple as that. Just because the guys come to me because they've known me through a friend, it's usually a referral. As long as I don't completely fluff the quote or overcharge, or as long as I just do my job reasonably well, I'll get the job. Whereas with home automation, you can quote 10 times and get 1 job. And that's quite frustrating. The amount of time people waste because they have no idea what it's going to cost. They think it's going to cost 20,000 and they want to run their lights and switch the microwave on from their car, and it's not going to cost 20,000. So from that point of view, home automation can be a little bit frustrating because you end up quoting and quoting and quoting to get fewer jobs.
Okay, now I'm going to hop back from the world of the Internet of Things, then back to the subject that we started with, which is a hi-fi. And you do upgrades as part of your service offering. And is it possible to upgrade in a kind of a modular fashion? In other words, like one used to do with separates, you could upgrade speaker, amp, whatever. Or do you find that you're increasingly upgrading an entire ecosystem, an entire brand?
No, I think it's certainly possible to upgrade bit by bit. And we do have quite a lot of customers that are happy to improve their amplifier or improve their speakers. And quite often, because we keep in touch with clients quite often, I tend to have quite a big client base that speak to me reasonably often for little things. Something goes wrong with their satellite, they can't operate something on their decoder. So I often get calls from clients and I actually keep in touch with them quite often. And through that, people are often chatting about, you tell them what to do, what button to press on their DSTV decoder, And next thing they're saying, you know, actually, while I've got you on the line, I wouldn't mind some sound outside, or I wouldn't mind a bigger TV, or I wouldn't mind some better audio. So we actually do quite a bit of upgrade type sales, and it's a great market to be in. I love that. I think that the more modern look also helps with the upgrade. So people, even though their speakers may sound okay, when they have an old looking brown box, they often want something more modern or something more discreet. And that helps us do more upgrades as well. So I agree with you. There's a lot of upgrade market out there, and it's a great market. We do plenty of it.
And to what extent does WAF factor you into your business, especially the upgrades and whatnot?
So you're saying WAF?
Yes.
Okay, the people who are wasting our time a little bit.
No. Well, I mean, generally the wife approval factor.
Wife approval factor. It is a part of it for sure. It depends on the client. It depends on the client. Sometimes it's the wife buying the equipment and not the hubby, so there's plenty of that. Maybe not as much as there should be, but that's there. So yes, that is where the move has come to things like ceiling speakers, which is a pity because you just can't get quite the same sound out of a set of ceiling speakers. So there is that, and the move towards little speakers and a subwoofer as opposed to bigger floor standing speakers and that type of thing. So aesthetics is a big part of the whole picture, and we often deal with an interior designer or an architect, and then the look does come into it. It's certainly part of it.
All right, well, it's 8:15 and we're getting close to wrapping up. There's a question from Dave Francis, and maybe you'd like to expand on the work you do in home theater setups.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, home theater we really enjoy doing, and we've done quite a few over the years. So JVC is our most popular brand in terms of home theater projectors when we do projectors, but they have become quite pricey. They're not cheap. In terms of theater install, in terms of amplification and speakers, again, we often do quite discreet. People don't always like the look of the speakers. So we will do things like B&W in-wall speakers, which are really nice. We did a theater in Camps Bay about 2 or 3 months ago with a JVC laser projector, which had an amazing quality, with a screen that was probably 3 meters wide, which is unusual. It's a really big screen, but that laser projector was phenomenal. And there we used an Integra amp, which is part of the Onkyo stable. So Integra is part of Onkyo. And we used B&W in-wall 800 series, which are phenomenal speakers with their dB range sub. And it worked out really well. So that was a nice system. When people do a custom room, they are usually quite happy to spend quite big money. You know, if the guy's going to put a custom room in his house, he usually wants something impressive. We have noticed a move away from projectors in the last year or two, mainly because the big TVs have become so much cheaper. So, you know, something like an 85-inch Samsung, you can get these days for 36,000 Rand. And an 85-inch Samsung 3 years ago would have cost 200,000 Rand. So people who would have bought a projector for a 100-inch screen or a 90-inch screen would rather buy an 85 or an 86-inch TV, and it actually makes more sense.
You know, there's something that I've always wondered about these really top-end, mid and top-end installations, and that is have you guys ever done not a repeat, but let's say an upgrade where people have had a serious thing with, in-wall Watsits, and have you ever had to go in and redo it with a better system?
So yes, we've certainly upgraded. So upgrading in-wall stuff is not so easy because you've really built it into the system.
That's what I'm thinking.
Yeah, absolutely. But we have plenty of customers where we have upgraded the projector or upgraded the speakers, and the home theater clients do upgrade them quite often. And actually quite a funny story. About 2 years ago, exactly 2 years ago, 2019, for the Rugby World Cup, JVC had a competition where you had to sell a certain number of projectors to get tickets, and they would take you over to Japan for the World Cup, which I was obviously rather keen on. So I bought in one of their little projectors, which is not so little. I mean, their baby projector sells for 55,000 Rand. So it's an expensive projector. And I phoned 6 or 7 existing clients who had cheaper, older projectors. And I basically just took them the JVC to use for a day or two so that they could see the difference. And with projectors, over the last 4 or 5 years, the difference in quality has been absolutely huge. They've gone through the roof in terms of quality. They're so much better than they used to be. And almost every one of those clients bought a JVC projector because it was just complete chalk and cheese to what they had. And it's quite nice having the database where you know who has a projector already, who can afford it, and you kind of know what they've got. So it's easy to make a decent improvement. And it's actually not something I usually do, kind of go out cold selling, trying to sell stuff. I usually wait for people to kind of phone me and ask what they want, But it was quite an interesting exercise, and I ended up selling plenty of them. So it was.
Did you enjoy the rugby is the question.
Oh no, I went to the rugby for sure. It was the last overseas trip I did just before lockdown. So yeah, I mean, they took us over for a week. They paid for everything. It was an amazing trip. Japan was phenomenal to see.
Well done. Okay.
Thank you.
Let's wrap it up. I think on that note. But one thing I haven't asked you, and maybe you need to tell us, is how do people contact you?
I have a website, audiosmiths.co.za. Most people phone me on my cell phone, I must say. It's my I have a business telephone number, but it's actually my home number. So I don't really put that number out there. I kind of put my cell phone.
They can get the details of the website then, I'm sure.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's a contact. So it's audiosmiths.co.za, or my email address is vernon@audiosmiths.co.za.
Okay, and on that note then, Vernon, thanks very much for a fascinating and sometimes eye-opening evening chatting with you.
Thank you.
If there's anybody who'd like to shout out a couple of questions, have a quick chat with Vernon, I'm sure he'll be happy to spend a few minutes more with us. Other than that, from me, it's thanks to everyone for being here this evening, and until next time.
Thanks very much. Anybody got any questions?
Anybody else say something? No?
That's it.
They must all be experts already.
I'm sure they all know plenty about audio if it's their love.
Well, we tinker all day long, yeah. Thank you very much, Vernon.
We even listen to music occasionally.
Yeah, we do, yes.
That's a good thing.
As well as admiring the equipment.
Yeah.
Thank you very much indeed, Vernon. Very kind of you to talk to us.
Thanks again. And
Okay.
good night.
Good night, Vernon.
Thanks, everybody. All right. Cheers.
Bye.
Thank you, Vernon.